Caleb Turner had lived most of his life under the wide Arizona sky, where the sun rose early, the evenings were quiet, and the land stretched far in every direction. He was a cowboy in the truest sense, steady, hard-working, and used to doing things with his own hands. People in town often said he was the kind of man who fixed fences before they broke, woke up before the rooster crowed, and never complained, even when the day was long and the work was heavy. He lived on a small ranch that had belonged to his father, and before that, his grandfather. It wasn't a big place, but it held years of memories, both happy and sad. For many years, Caleb had not been alone. His wife, Emma, had been the heart of the house. She was warm, gentle, and always knew how to make their daughters laugh. But life had its own turns. And when Emma passed away, the ranch felt different. The rooms felt quieter. The air felt still. And even the land seemed less alive. Caleb raised their two daughters, Mia and Rosie, with all the love he had. He cooked for them, braided their hair when they were little, helped them with schoolwork, and taught them about the ranch. He was strict sometimes, but always fair, and the girls respected him deeply. Years went by, and the girls grew up. Mia, the older one, was smart and thoughtful. She wanted to study community planning so she could help improve small towns like the one they lived in. Rosie, younger and full of energy, wanted to study art. Both of them now lived in a nearby town for college, visiting Caleb when they could. They called him every week, sometimes every day, if something exciting happened. Mia always asked if he had eaten properly, while Rosie teased him for not having anyone to talk to except cows and horses. Caleb simply laughed and said he was fine. Even though he said those words easily, life on the ranch had become silent in a way he didn't always admit. The early mornings were the same, the chores were the same, and the nights were long. After his daughters moved out, the house felt too big for him. Some evenings he sat on the porch, listening to the soft wind, thinking about the past, and wondering how quickly time had moved. He wasn't unhappy, but he wasn't truly happy either. He had settled into a life of routine, strong on the outside, quiet on the inside. Every morning he woke up before sunrise. He made himself coffee, the same way he had for years, and stepped outside to breathe the cool morning air. He walked to the barn, greeting the cattle, feeding the horses, checking the water tanks, and making sure every gate was properly locked. Sometimes he talked to the animals the way people talk to old friends. They didn't answer back, but in their own way, they kept him company. Caleb didn't show emotion often. Not because he didn't feel anything, but because he had learned to keep things inside. Ranch life had taught him to be tough, to endure heat, wind, long days, and hard work. But loneliness was different. It wasn't something he could fix with a hammer or solve with a day of hard labor. It stayed quietly, like a shadow at the edge of his life. Mia and Rosie knew their father better than anyone. They knew he missed having someone around, even if he never said so. When they visited, they filled the house with laughter and stories. They cooked with him, helped him with chores, and made him sit down and rest. Sometimes they tried to talk to him about meeting new people, but Caleb always brushed it off with a smile, saying he was too old or too busy. Deep inside, the idea scared him. He had loved Emma too deeply to imagine anyone else in his life. He felt it would be disrespectful to move on. But his daughters believed differently. They believed he deserved companionship, warmth, and someone who understood him. One Friday morning, Caleb received a message from Mia saying they would be visiting for the weekend. He felt a small spark of happiness brighten his quiet day. He cleaned the house a little, swept the porch, and washed the dishes. He wasn't messy. But when the girls came home, they always teased him about the way he kept things too simple. They liked rearranging things and adding color to the house, and even though he pretended to be annoyed, he actually enjoyed their playful complaints. By afternoon, he checked the guest room, put fresh sheets on the beds, and made sure the kitchen had everything the girls liked. Rosie loved fruit, especially mangoes. Mia liked making tea in the evening, so he stocked up on her favorite kind. He knew they would laugh and tell him he didn't need to do all that, but being prepared made him feel good. It made him feel like the house wasn't just a building, but a home waiting for his children. Later that evening, he sat on the porch again, watching the sun sink behind the hills. The sky turned orange, then pink, and finally purple as the stars came out. Caleb sipped his tea and wondered what stories the girls would bring this time. Their college life was filled with new people, new ideas, and new experiences. Sometimes he worried they would forget the simple ranch life, but they always proved him wrong. They loved their childhood home, and they made sure to show it. That night, Caleb went to bed earlier than usual, wanting to be rested for their arrival the next day. But he felt a strange mix of excitement and something he couldn't quite put his finger on. It was as if the air itself held a quiet hint of change, something he could not see yet but would soon feel. He wondered if maybe he was just overthinking. But the feeling stayed. The next morning, he woke up before dawn, as always. The air was crisp, and the first light touched the land gently. Caleb did his morning chores quickly, wanting everything to be ready before his daughters arrived. After feeding the animals and checking the fences, he returned to the house, washed up, and made breakfast. Simple eggs, bread, and coffee, nothing fancy, but comforting. As the day grew warmer, he heard the distant sound of a car approaching. He stepped onto the porch, adjusting his hat, expecting to see Mia and Rosie waving from the windows, and he did see them both smiling brightly, both excited to be home, but there was someone else with them in the back seat. Caleb's eyes narrowed slightly in curiosity as the car rolled closer. The girls jumped out immediately and ran to hug him. Mia held him tight, and Rosie squeezed him so hard he laughed. Then they turned back to the car and motioned for someone to come out. A young woman stepped out, graceful, calm, with long dark hair and eyes that held both strength and kindness. She wore simple clothes, but she carried herself with a quiet confidence. She looked around the ranch with gentle interest. "Dad," Mia said, smiling widely, "this is Liana. She's our friend from college. We invited her to spend the weekend with us." Caleb felt a sudden stillness inside him, not fear, not discomfort, but a sense that something new had just entered his life. He didn't know who she was, but the moment she smiled politely and greeted him, he sensed that the weekend was going to be different from any before. And he was right. Though he didn't know it yet, the arrival of this gentle Apache woman would slowly begin to change the quiet rhythm of his life, opening doors he thought had closed forever. The moment Liana stepped out of the car, Caleb felt the air around him shift in a way he couldn't explain. She stood quietly beside Mia and Rosie, her hands folded politely in front of her, her eyes observing the land with a soft curiosity. There was nothing loud or dramatic about her presence. Instead, she carried a calmness that felt almost peaceful. Her long dark hair was braided neatly, and the sunlight touched her face gently, making her look warm and approachable. Rosie, always the most energetic, began talking first. "Dad, you're going to love her. She's helping with a cultural project at our college, and she's really good at everything. Like, really good." Mia rolled her eyes playfully. "She's exaggerating." "But yes, Dad. She's a wonderful person. We thought she would enjoy some time outside the city." Caleb nodded politely, unsure of what to say. Meeting new people always made him feel a bit awkward, especially when his daughters watched his reactions so closely. He stepped forward, offering a handshake. "Welcome," he said gently. "Hope the drive wasn't too long for you." Liana shook his hand lightly, her touch respectful. "Thank you. The drive was fine. The land here, it's beautiful." She looked around again, taking in the wide fields, the gentle hills, and the open sky. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Rosie clapped her hands together. "Okay, we're hungry. Dad, did you make something? Please tell me you didn't only make eggs." Caleb chuckled and motioned them toward the house. "I made breakfast earlier, but I can fix something more if you want." All three girls followed him inside, chatting among themselves. The house, though simple, looked brighter, with their voices filling the space. Liana stepped inside slowly, her eyes taking in the old photographs on the wall, the wooden furniture, and the wide windows that showed the ranch outside. Caleb noticed her interest and felt slightly embarrassed. The house wasn't fancy, but it was clean and well kept. Still, something about having a guest made him wish he had added more color or decoration. But Liana didn't look judgmental. In fact, her expression was soft, almost appreciative. The girls sat at the kitchen table, and Caleb began making fresh food, nothing complicated. Just warm bread, eggs, and beans. As he cooked, he listened quietly to the conversation behind him. "So where exactly did you meet Liana?" he heard Caleb ask. "At the community center," Mia explained. "The college is working with local groups on cultural programs. Liana teaches younger kids about Apache traditions." Rosie added, "She even taught us a little too. She knows all kinds of stories. And art. And—" "Rosie," Mia interrupted with a laugh. "Let her breathe." Liana smiled shyly. "They're being kind. I just help where I can." Caleb brought the food to the table, and everyone helped themselves. He wasn't used to eating with someone he didn't know. But the conversation was gentle and easy. Liana asked questions about the ranch, how old it was, how many cattle he owned, and what daily work looked like. Her tone was respectful, and she listened carefully to everything he said, which surprised Caleb. Most people his age didn't care much about ranch life. But she seemed truly interested. After breakfast, Mia suggested showing Liana around the ranch. Caleb offered to join them, partly out of politeness, partly out of curiosity. He wanted to understand who this young woman was and why his daughters admired her so much. They walked together toward the barn. The sun was warm but not too strong, and the breeze carried the scent of dry grass. Liana stopped for a moment, closing her eyes as if feeling the land beneath her. She touched a nearby plant gently. "My grandmother taught me to appreciate every place I visit," she said softly. She said every land carries its own story. Caleb looked at her, surprised by how naturally she connected with her surroundings. Most visitors simply admired the view from a distance, but Liana seemed to understand it in a deeper way. Inside the barn, Rosie excitedly introduced Liana to all the animals. The horses were calm, the cattle quiet, and the chickens busy pecking at the ground. Liana stepped forward slowly, extending her hand toward one of the horses. The animal sniffed her hand and leaned closer, accepting her touch without hesitation. "You have a gentle way with animals," Caleb said quietly. Liana looked at him with a humble smile. "My father taught me to respect them. They sense everything. Our calm, our fear, our intentions." Rosie whispered to Mia, "See? Dad likes her already." Caleb pretended not to hear that, though his ears burned slightly. The rest of the morning passed easily. They walked through the fields, talking about small things, the weather, the crops, old childhood memories. Liana asked about Emma, Caleb's late wife. Not in a probing way but with sincere respect. Caleb spoke slowly, choosing his words carefully. Talking about Emma still hurt, but Liana's presence made it feel less heavy, as if she was honoring the memory instead of reopening the wound. By afternoon, the sun grew hotter, and they all returned to the porch to rest. Mia brought out cold drinks, and they sat in rocking chairs, enjoying the view. Liana watched the distant hills, her eyes thoughtful. "This place reminds me of my home," she said softly. "Not the land itself, but the feeling." Caleb glanced at her. "Where did you grow up?" "In a small community near the mountains," she said. "My family still lives there. We grew up close to nature, always learning from it." Rosie leaned forward, interested. "Tell Dad that story you told us. The one about the morning light." 5. Liana nodded, looking a little shy but willing. She spoke in a gentle voice, telling them a short story her grandmother used to share. It was about the first morning light. how it was believed to carry blessings for those who started their day with gratitude. It wasn't a dramatic story, but it felt meaningful. Even Caleb listened without moving, drawn to the calm way she spoke. When she finished, Mia sighed happily. "See, Dad? Isn't she amazing?" Caleb cleared his throat, trying not to appear too impressed. "It's a good story," he admitted. "Your grandmother sounds wise." Liana smiled. "She was. She taught me to see people and places with an open heart." The day continued with small moments like this, simple, peaceful, but warm. Each time Liana spoke, her words carried sincerity. Each time she smiled, it felt gentle and real. Caleb found himself watching her without meaning to. She wasn't loud or demanding. She didn't try to impress anyone. She was simply herself, and that was enough to draw attention. Later in the evening, the girls went inside to prepare dinner. Liana offered to help, but Mia insisted she rest. Caleb stayed on the porch, and after a moment, Liana stepped outside again, joining him quietly. They both looked out at the sunset, its colors painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. Neither spoke for a while. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need to be filled. Finally, Liana said softly, "Your daughters love you very much. I can see it in the way they talk about you." Caleb smiled faintly. "I'm lucky. They grew up strong." She nodded. "Because you raised them well." Her words were simple, but they touched something deep in him. He wasn't used to receiving gentle praise, not since Emma had been there to give it. For a moment, he felt warmth inside his chest, like a quiet reminder that life still had tenderness left in it. When dinner was ready, they all gathered around the table again. There was laughter, small jokes, shared stories. The house felt full, warm, alive, different. Caleb noticed how easily Liana blended in, as if she had always been part of their small family. As night settled in, Mia whispered to Rosie with a knowing smile. Caleb saw them whispering and narrowed his eyes suspiciously, but they only grinned back at him with innocent faces. He didn't fully understand their plans yet, but he sensed something. They hadn't brought Liana just as a guest. They brought her for a reason, a quiet hope, and as the night grew peaceful, Caleb realized something else too. He didn't mind her being there, not at all. In fact, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a gentle curiosity, a soft pull toward someone new. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in years, he felt that the quiet life he had accepted for so long might not stay the same anymore. And the change didn't feel frightening. It felt right natural, like the first warm breeze after a long, cold season. The next morning began with a soft, gentle rain. It wasn't the kind that caused trouble, but the kind that made the world look calm and fresh. The drops tapped lightly on the roof, and a faint mist rose from the fields. Caleb stepped onto the porch with his cup of coffee, watching the clouds move slowly across the sky. Rain on the ranch always made him thoughtful. It reminded him of old memories, both good and sad. He expected everyone else to still be asleep, but he was surprised to see Liana sitting quietly on the porch swing, wrapped in a warm shawl. She was watching the rain too, her eyes calm, her posture relaxed. She looked like she belonged there, as if she had lived on the ranch all her life. "I hope I'm not taking your spot," she said softly when she noticed him. Caleb shook his head. "Not at all. I usually stand anyway." She smiled a little. "It's beautiful here in the morning." He nodded, taking a slow sip of his coffee. "It is, even after all these years. Mornings still feel new." There was a quiet moment between them, not uncomfortable, but peaceful. Caleb wasn't used to sharing his mornings with anyone. He always spent them alone, thinking, planning, listening to the land wake up, but having someone next to him didn't feel strange. In fact, it felt surprisingly natural. "The girls are still sleeping," Liana said gently. "They were tired. They always stay up too late talking," Caleb replied with a soft chuckle. Liana laughed quietly. "They do. And they argue about the smallest things." "It's funny." Caleb glanced at her. "You know them well." "I do," she said. They're good friends. They care about people. That's rare. He felt a small warmth in his chest at her words. He knew his daughters were good. But hearing it from someone else always made him proud. When the rain grew heavier, he invited her inside. They sat at the kitchen table while he made a fresh pot of coffee and warmed some bread. She helped without him asking, handing him plates, wiping the table gently. She moved with care, as if she respected the space around her. You don't have to help, he said. I like helping, she replied simply. The girls eventually woke up, and the house filled with their familiar chatter. Rosie told them she had dreamed the chickens were chasing her. Mia teased her. Liana laughed softly, and Caleb just shook his head. The morning felt warm, full, alive. By noon, the rain slowed but didn't stop. The dirt roads were too muddy to drive on safely, so the girls decided they should stay on the ranch for the rest of the day. Liana didn't seem upset at all. In fact, she looked almost relieved. Caleb wasn't sure what to do with the unexpected extra time, but the girls made the decision for him. Dad, Rosie said loudly, we're all going to help you with chores today. Caleb raised an eyebrow. All of you? Yes, she replied with confidence. Even Liana. Liana nodded politely. I'd like to help, and so the four of them stepped into the damp world outside. The ground was soft, the air fresh, and the clouds low. They checked the barn, cleaned the feeding area, and moved hay. Caleb tried not to look too surprised when Liana lifted hay bales with steady hands. She wasn't weak, despite her calm nature. You've done this before? He asked, half impressed. She brushed her hands together. My family had animals back home. We worked every day. Rosie whistled. Look at her, Dad. She might be stronger than you. Caleb shook his head but smiled. Maybe she is. They spent a long time working together, and Caleb found himself watching Liana again, not in a way that made him uncomfortable, but in a way that made him curious. She didn't complain about the mud or the hard work. She didn't rush. She moved slowly, thoughtfully, as if she respected every part of the ranch. At one point, while fixing a loose fence board, Caleb accidentally hit his thumb lightly with the hammer. He didn't make a sound, but Liana noticed immediately and walked over. Are you okay? She asked, concern in her eyes. I'm fine, he said. She gently checked his hand anyway. Be careful. You work too fast sometimes. Caleb looked at her, a little surprised by the gentle care in her voice. It had been years since anyone looked after him like that. The moment was small, but it stayed with him. After the chores, they walked together across the wet fields. The grass brushed against their boots, and the sky began to brighten. Mia and Rosie walked ahead, pointing at something in the distance, laughing and chatting. Liana and Caleb followed slowly. You have a peaceful life here, she said quietly. It's simple, he replied, sometimes too simple. She tilted her head slightly. Do you ever feel lonely? Her question was gentle, not sharp or pushy. Caleb thought about it before answering. Sometimes, he said honestly. But I manage, she nodded slowly. I understand that feeling. Caleb glanced at her. Do you? Yes, she said softly. Even when you have people around you, you can feel alone inside. There was something in her voice, something that made him realize she carried her own quiet struggles. She didn't talk about them in detail, but he sensed she had experienced loss and change too. They walked in silence for a while, their steps in rhythm. It felt easy, like walking with someone he had known for years. He didn't feel the need to talk constantly, and she didn't feel the need to fill the silence. When they returned to the house, the girls decided to bake something. Rosie wanted cookies, Mia wanted bread, and Liana offered to help with both. The kitchen quickly became loud and messy. There was flour everywhere, the oven beeped nonstop, and Rosie almost dropped a whole bowl of batter. Caleb stayed out of the way, leaning on the doorway, watching them. He couldn't remember the last time the house felt this full. The laughter, the clatter of plates, the warmth, it all made the house feel alive again. At one point, Liana turned and caught him watching. She smiled quietly, and Caleb felt something stir inside him, something warm and new. Later, When the cookies were done, everybody sat in the living room eating them. Rosie bragged about her baking skills, even though Mia had done most of the work. Liana sat beside Caleb on the couch. Not too close, but not far either. He could feel her gentle presence next to him. It didn't make him nervous. It made him feel steady, seen, understood. As evening approached, the rain stopped completely. The sky cleared just enough to show a soft golden light spreading across the ranch. Caleb and Liana stepped outside again, while the girls cleaned up inside. The air was cool, and the fields glistened from the rain. They stood on the porch, watching the last drops fall from the roof. "This place feels like it has a quiet heart," Liana said softly. Caleb looked at her. "Most people don't notice that." "I'm not most people," she replied gently. He smiled a little. "No, you're not." She turned to him, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Your daughters care about you deeply. They told me they worry you stay too alone." Caleb sighed softly. "They think too much. They think with love," she said. "That's different." He appreciated her words more than he expected to. It felt like she understood something he rarely spoke about. As the light faded, Liana suddenly looked a little uneasy. "It will be difficult for us to return home tonight," she said quietly. "The roads are still muddy." "You can stay," Caleb said before thinking. "There's room." She looked at him with soft eyes, grateful, but calm. "Thank you." Inside, the girls were already celebrating the fact that she would stay another night. Caleb pretended to be annoyed at their excitement. But deep inside, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt glad. That night, after everyone went to bed, Caleb sat alone for a moment. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't the same quiet as before. It felt different. Warmer, as if someone had opened a window inside his heart, letting fresh air in. He knew he was beginning to feel something gentle, something careful, something honest. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was the beginning of a bond, a soft thread pulling him toward a new possibility, and he didn't want to run from it. He wanted to see where it would lead. The next morning came quietly, with the air fresh and cool after the long rain. Soft sunlight entered the house, touching the walls with a warm glow. Caleb woke up earlier than everyone else, as he always did. But this time, there was a different feeling inside him. He couldn't describe it clearly. It wasn't excitement, and it wasn't nervousness. It was something calm, something steady, something that made him feel quietly hopeful. He stepped outside with his cup of coffee, watching the land slowly wake up. Birds were hopping around on the wet soil, and the sky carried soft streaks of gold. It was peaceful, so peaceful that he didn't hear the footsteps behind him at first. When he turned, he saw Liana walking toward him, wrapped in her shawl just like the day before. Her hair was still braided, and her eyes looked gentle in the morning light. "You're up early," she said softly. He smiled. "Old habits." She came to stand beside him on the porch, looking out at the fields. "It's beautiful today," she whispered. "After the rain," Caleb said. "Everything feels new." Liana nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "My grandmother used to say that when the land is washed clean, the heart feels lighter too." Caleb glanced at her quietly. "Do you feel lighter today?" She smiled gently. "Yes, I think so." They stood there for a long time, not talking much, simply sharing the quiet morning. It felt natural, as if they had been starting their mornings together for years. Inside, the girls woke up, and the house filled with their usual noise, laughing, teasing, moving around quickly. Rosie came outside with messy hair and sleepy eyes. "Good morning, Dad, and Liana," she said, raising an eyebrow. "You two are early." "We always are," Caleb replied. Rosie nudged him with a playful smirk. Interesting." He shook his head. "You talk too much." Mia joined them soon, and all four had breakfast together. It was warm and simple, but the company made it feel special. By mid-morning, the roads finally dried enough to drive. The girls had planned to leave after lunch. The air inside the house grew a little heavy when they began packing. Caleb felt something inside him tighten at the idea of them leaving, and at the idea of Liana leaving. She moved quietly around the room, folding her things carefully. Her face calm but not quite as relaxed as yesterday. Caleb noticed that she seemed thoughtful, almost distant, as if she had something on her mind. While Mia and Rosie loaded the car, Caleb found Liana standing alone near the porch, touching one of the wooden beams gently. "You like the porch?" he asked softly. "I do," she said. He nodded, looking at her for a moment. Then he said, "You're welcome here any time." Her eyes lifted to his, surprised but warm. "Thank you," she said. "That means more than you know." Before either of them could say anything more, the girls called them over. It was time to say goodbye. Mia hugged Caleb first, telling him to take care of himself and not skip meals. Rosie hugged him next, whispering, "Dad, don't be stubborn. Good things don't happen every day." He frowned at her, confused. She just winked and jumped into the car. Liana stood in front of him last, her hands folded gently, her eyes soft and respectful. "Thank you for having me," she said. "Your home. It has a kind heart." He felt something tighten in his chest. "Come again," he said quietly. "Don't wait too long." Her smile was small but full of meaning. "I won't." And then she got into the car, and they drove away down the long dirt road. Caleb stood there watching the car grow smaller and smaller until it disappeared over the hill. The silence that followed felt different, not empty, but thoughtful. He walked back inside the house. Everything was quiet again. But the quiet didn't feel lonely this time. It felt like something had changed inside him. Something gentle. Something patient. The week passed slowly but peacefully. Caleb worked on the ranch, fixed a few fences, checked on the animals, and kept himself busy. But once in a while, he found his thoughts drifting to Liana, her calm voice, her gentle smile, her way of listening. He wondered if he would see her again. He hoped he would. Though he didn't say that out loud, 3 days later, his phone rang in the evening. He wiped his hands and answered it. "Hello, Dad." Rosie's cheerful voice burst through the speaker. Caleb smiled a little. "Hello. Everything okay?" "Yes, everything's fine. But, someone wants to talk to you." Before he could ask who, another voice came through, soft, warm, familiar. "Hello, Caleb." It was Liana. Caleb's heart gave a quiet, careful jump. "Hello," he said, trying not to sound surprised. "How are you?" "I'm fine," she said. I wanted to thank you again for the weekend. It stayed in my heart." His voice softened. "Mine too." There was a pause, gentle, not awkward. Then Liana said, "The girls are coming again next weekend. They asked if I wanted to join." Caleb's breath caught slightly. "And, do you want to?" "Yes," she said, her voice warm. "If you don't mind." "I don't mind," he said, feeling something inside him brighten. "You're always welcome." When the call ended, Caleb sat for a long moment in the quiet house. But this time the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt full, hopeful, like something was growing quietly inside it. The weekend came, and once again the car appeared on the dirt road. The girls stepped out laughing. Liana stepped out last, her eyes meeting Caleb's with a soft warmth, as if she had been waiting for this moment too. Over the next days, something gentle began forming between them. Not rushed, not forced. It grew in small moments, walking through the fields, sharing morning coffee, listening to each other's stories. They didn't talk about the future yet, but the air between them carried a quiet understanding. One evening, after dinner, they walked together under the soft glow of the stars. The ranch was calm, the sky clear, the night air cool. They stopped near the fence, listening to the distant sounds of nighttime animals. Liana spoke first. "I never expected to feel so comfortable here." Caleb looked at her. "I never expected anyone to make this place feel new again." She smiled gently. "Life surprises us when we stop expecting everything to stay the same." He nodded slowly, feeling the truth of her words settle in his heart. After a long, quiet moment, Liana said softly, "Caleb, you're a strong man." But you don't have to walk your life alone. Not if you don't want to. He looked at her carefully. Her eyes held no pressure, no expectation, only calm honesty. He took a slow breath. I don't want to be alone, he said quietly. The words surprising even himself. Her face softened, and she reached out her hand, not grabbing, not pulling, just offering. Caleb looked at her hand for a moment, then gently took it. The touch was simple but full of meaning. It felt like the beginning of something real. The stars above them shone brighter, and the land around them felt peaceful. The girls watched from the porch, smiling softly, knowing their plan had worked even better than they hoped. Caleb Turner, the quiet cowboy who had lived alone for so many years, had finally opened his heart again. Not in a dramatic way, not in a sudden way, but in a slow, steady way, the way the land itself changed with the seasons. And beside him stood a gentle Apache woman who understood silence, understood nature, and understood the soft corners of the heart that people often hide. Together, without rushing, they took the first steps toward a new chapter, one filled with companionship, respect, warmth, and a peaceful kind of love that grows like morning light. Not loud, not hurried,